All right, hello. My name is Kyle. I'm a senior here at Explore Knowledge Academy, and my senior project is on recycling. All right, so here's an overview about what I'm going to be discussing. So the first thing is the focus and purpose of my project, so why I'm doing it, the steps I took to complete it, the artifacts I gained along the way, the resources that helped me complete it, the lessons I learned while completing it, the things that went good and the things that didn't go so good, and the people I have to thank for helping me along the way. All right, so the purpose of my project was just to simply get the students of Explore Knowledge Academy to start recycling, as well as to become involved in community projects that had to do with recycling. And the way I got the idea for this project was actually in my junior year, when I noticed that students were printing a lot of paper at this school, but when they didn't need it anymore, they were just throwing it away. So I thought it would make a lot more sense if they just recycled it instead, and so that's what I decided to make my senior project about. All right, so the steps. So the first thing I obviously needed to do was to obtain the recycling bins that I needed, and I did this through donations. I also needed to get publicity and tell the students that, hey, we have recycling bins now, so you can start recycling. I wanted to weigh the bins so I could record how much paper was actually being recycled. And I also needed to do some extra things like teaching a recycling seminar and having a recycled art project. And then finally, I wanted to participate in the community to help it recycle as well. All right, so the first thing, getting the bins. To get the bins, I reached out to several local companies and just asked them to donate bins. And I had a little bit of trouble at this at first, just finding someone that would be willing to donate. But eventually, thanks to generous donations from companies like Junkman, Home Depot, Lowe's, and later Donors Choose, I was able to get the recycling bins I needed. So the second thing, spreading the word. So after I'd gotten the bins, I needed to tell the students that I had them so they could start recycling. So the first thing I did, I just took the direct approach and went from classroom to classroom, just explaining that I got the bins and how I would like the students to use them and what recycling was all about. After that, I put up recycling posters all over the school next to the bins, and there was even one here in the lunchroom. And finally, I made an announcement during lunch about recycling and how I'd finally gotten the new bins I needed. All right, so weighing the bins. I bought a scale so I could weigh the bins, and so every Friday I would just take this scale, and after everyone had left the school, I would take all the bins, weigh them, and record the amount of weight that they weighed each week. And I would do this because I wanted to see how much paper the students were actually recycling. And so that was the basic way I could do that. Then I needed to make a graph to essentially show the growth throughout the school year of how much paper was recycled. And at first I made a bunch of physical graphs, but they didn't look so good, so I eventually had to make a couple of digital ones that were more accurate. So here's a graph about the printing results, and another thing that was pretty interesting is not only was I tracking how much paper was being recycled, but I was also tracking how much paper was being printed. And I know the numbers on this graph look pretty intimidating, but this is actually an accumulation of all the paper printed throughout the year. So we weren't printing this amount each week. This is how much we have printed from the start of the year until the end. And this is the amount of paper we printed. 118,481 sheets of paper were printed within the time I recorded and stopped recording. Now, here's the amount of paper recycled. I know it might look a lot less significant than the previous graph, but actually if you'll look, each classroom did recycle at least 5 pounds of paper each week, and some classes did reach pretty good heights and amounts. So the total amount of paper recycled by the end of the year was 204 pounds. So that was pretty impressive, and I'm proud of you all. All right, so the seminars I hosted. The seminar I hosted was called Upcycling, and the general idea of it was to get the students to make different works of art using materials that could be recycled or materials that had already outlived their usefulness and would have been thrown away. So during this seminar, I also would teach the students about recycling and like how the materials they were using would be recycled. All right, so the first thing we did during the first seminar was just making paper flowers. It was a really simple thing. I didn't want to start out too complicated. And this actually tied in with Kat's senior project because once we had finished making all the flowers, we donated them to the retirement home so the senior citizens there could get something nice to look at. During the second seminar, we also started off simple and just made bird feeders. And those were really easy to make. All we needed was a toilet paper roll, a paper plate, and 2 pieces of string. And I like just the simplicity of that because it just shows that you can make something out of materials you thought were completely useless or just simple, or the only usefulness they had was just one thing and then they had to be thrown away. So during the third seminar, and this was probably one of my favorites, we made works of art using paper towel rolls. And a lot of the students got really creative with this and made some interesting works of art. And I'll talk more about those later when I get to my artifacts. So during the fourth seminar, we just started making art using anything we could find. Some students made like houses just using sheets of printer paper. Others made like, I guess, model apartments using cardboard boxes and soda cans. So during the fifth seminar, that's when we took a field trip to the retirement home and donated all those paper flowers we made. And I guess that kind of just went to show how taking something that you could have just thrown away and making it into something else can make someone happy. All right, so step 6, the recycled art project. So after the seminar, I helped organize a recycled art project, and this was with Miss Chapman's students in her art class. And what we did essentially was we gave each student a certain amount of recyclable materials. For example, we would give them like 3 plastic water bottles, 2 paper bags, like lots of notes, sheets of notebook paper, and etc. And we each instructed them to make different works of art out of that. And a lot of them made some really interesting, cool-looking abstract works of art. But by the end of it, we decided that we couldn't just display all of them because there were so many. So we decided to combine them all together into one big sculpture, and we displayed that at Fashion Trashin'. I'm not sure if any of you noticed it, but it was there. All right, so step 7, the community involvement. And this was, other than just getting the school to recycle, this was another huge part of my project. So I wanted to volunteer in as many community events that involved recycling as I could. So the first thing I did was volunteer at this organization called Clean the World, and what they do is they recycle soap. And I know that doesn't sound very interesting, but it was actually pretty cool to see how they did it. What they did was they took soap from hotels that had already used the soap or didn't need it anymore for various reasons, and they ground it all up into just bits. Then they would sanitize it, melt it down, and reshape it into new clean soap that could be used again. They would then donate this soap to third world countries, to people that didn't have any. So another thing I did was I got incorporated within my job. I work at this company called Junkman, and we essentially just take things people don't need or want anymore. And I asked my boss, hey, can I recycle some of these things that can be recycled? And he said, sure. So one of my jobs was to sort the metal, the paper, and the plastic out. And I noticed that we got a lot of books, because apparently people just don't want books. So we got a lot of books, and I thought, hey, this kind of seems like a waste to just be recycling all this paper. I know it's going to be reused, but these are good books. So I got in contact with this organization called the Autism Foundation, and they would take old books and essentially just continue using them, even if people didn't want them anymore. So what I did was I cleaned the books. I obviously couldn't use soap and water, so I just dusted them off and got them looking as nice as I could. And I donated them to the Autism Foundation so they could use them. And one more simplistic thing I did was I decided to hold a garage sale, and as simple as that sounds, it actually turned out pretty well. What I did was I went around pestering my neighbors and saying, hey, do you have any old things you don't want anymore? Because I'll take them, sell them, and then I'll promise I'll donate the money to a good cause. And they said, sure. So they gave me just a bunch of their old things, and I sold them. And surprisingly, I actually made $800 off of that. And that blew my mind. Yeah, so After that, I donated all that money to the Clean the World Foundation that I mentioned earlier, the same one that recycles the soap, and they said they would put it to good use in their projects. All right, so more community involvement. I took a tour of the Palazzo Hotel and Casino to learn about their recycling methods, and they're really into recycling, and they have tons of different just ways they do it. So they actually have a pumping station where they will take all the water used in their hotel, re-sanitize it, and then reuse it in things like their showers and their fountains and everything. They would also take the food scraps that the customers or people at their restaurants would throw away, and they would take them all and donate them to pig farms. So they would even encourage their employees to carpool so they weren't like burning fossil fuels by driving cars and things. So they were really into recycling, and it was nice to see that even like big companies and things like that can still have a soft spot for the environment. Another thing I did was I volunteered at Mendoza Elementary and taught the students there how to make new paper out of, well, old destroyed paper. And a girl named Rachel Lewison, who actually works for Nevada Recycling, she's the one that was there helping me do that, and she taught me how to do it beforehand. And it's actually pretty simple. All you would do is take pieces of shredded paper that you might find just torn up or put through a shredder, dump them in water until they become nice and pulpy. Then we would pour them into a plate, a type of like special plate, and press them with a device used to meld and thin them out, as well as cool them and bond them. And after that, it would come out looking just like regular paper again. So that just made it seemed really simple just how something could be recycled, and it wasn't necessarily complicated. And one last little thing I did was set up greeting card collecting boxes in the front offices of this school. So any greeting cards that the teachers or the students got that they didn't need or want anymore, they would put in those boxes, and at the very end of the year, I collected them and brought them to St. Jude's Hospital, and they recycle greeting cards there. So that was just one more little thing I did. All right, the artifacts. These are the types of things that I picked up during my project that I needed to show its progress along the way. So some of my favorite things were the art seminar creations, because a lot of the kids got really creative, and I completely wasn't expecting any of the really interesting and creative things they created. Not that I didn't have any faith in them, but still, it was nice to see. The second thing was, of course, the recycling bins, since those were such a huge part of my project, and basically the thing that just kicked it off was getting those bins and having the students recycle. And third was the recycling posters, because they represented the publicity I got around the school about recycling. And here are some of the artifacts I got from the recycling seminar. You can see in the top left corner, there's a pencil that someone made out of a paper towel roll. In the top right, that's one of the bird feeders one of the students made. Bottom left, that's a tree. The middle, there's a glue stick, and on the far right, there's a caterpillar. So I was not expecting them to get that creative, and it really made me happy. So these are the resources, and these are essentially the people that helped me out throughout this project, and just without them, I wouldn't have been able to do it all. So the donors choose. They're the ones that donated those big recycling bins that are in the school right now, and although they weren't the first company that donated the recycling bins to me, they were definitely one of the most important, considering they donated the most and the largest recycling bins I had ever received, and that really helped me out. Rachel Lewison, she was the woman that helped me at Mendoza Elementary School and was helping me teach the students there how to recycle paper. Pranav Jumpave was he was the man that worked at the Global Sustainability Corporation, and he ran the Palazzo Hotel. He's the one that gave me the tour and pointed out all the unique features the hotel used while recycling. Kevin Williams, he was the man that worked at the Clean the World Foundation. He's the one that gave me the tour of the facility and showed me how they recycled all their soap and everything else. And finally, Robert Conier, he was the man that worked at the Autism Foundation. He was the one I talked to when I went to donate the books, and I got permission and everything from him. So here are some of the pictures of me standing with these individuals, the people that helped me. In the top left corner, that's me with Rachel Lewison making the paper. The bottom left, that's me at the Clean the World Foundation, seeing where they recycled all the soap. In the middle, that's me with Pranav Jumpave, where he showed me all the features of the recycling at the Palazzo Hotel. In the top right, there's me donating the books to the Autism Foundation. All right, so here's the lessons I learned throughout this project. First, asking questions get things done, and I'm a very prideful person. I always thought asking questions means, oh, you don't know the answer, so you have to show that you're not smart enough to figure it out on your own and ask someone else. But of course, I didn't realize that that's not a sign of weakness. That's just showing that you have a desire to want to find the answer and to want to learn. And that honestly makes you feel smarter. So making a list helps you get organized, because when they give you this senior project, it seems like a ton of things, and you're always wondering, how am I going to be able to get all this done? It just seems like a lot of work. But if you make a list, it really thins it down and makes it seem a lot more manageable and makes you realize, oh, this isn't too bad. I can get all this done. So it shows that, yeah, you have goals that you can set and accomplish in a timely manner. I also learned that there are many different ways to recycle other than the traditional, like paper, plastic, and metal and stuff. So you could recycle things like soap, food, and just all different sorts of materials can be reused. And it's not just melting things down and shaping them into something else. It's finding different uses for items that would have otherwise been thrown away. And finally, I learned that there's multiple different ways I can help my community. Whether it's through recycling, donating money, or just simply teaching people about how they can help the environment on their own. So here are the good and bad parts of my project. Now, starting off on a lighter note, the thing that made me happy was the students actually started to recycle. And once again, not that I didn't have any faith in you guys, but I was happy to see that, hey, the students were taking my words to heart and actually using all the recycling bins I put out. That made me really happy to see that I was having an impact. The second thing was, I felt that my seminar was very successful. All the students there seemed to be enjoying themselves. They felt happy, they were learning things, they were making interesting art projects, and I just looked forward to going to that and just essentially teaching it. And most rewardingly, I was able to give back to the community, and I felt like I was really helping everyone out and doing a good thing. Not only was I completing a project, but I was also positively impacting the world around me. Now, of course, everything also has to have a downside, so here it is. First of all, talking to people. Yeah, no one really enjoys talking to strangers they've never met before, and they could be anybody, that you don't really know who people are. So that was a little nerve-wracking, but I did eventually get over it, and I realized that there's a lot of nice people out there that are willing to help you. And I'm glad I did end up talking to people and having them help me out. The second was overwhelming work, and I'm not saying there's technically too much work involved in this, it just feels like a lot of it when they first give it to you, because they're saying this is a project that's going to last all year, and you're thinking, how am I going to manage to do something so big like this? And that really kind of freaked me out when I first got this, but I eventually realized that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, and honestly, I did have fun along the way. And the third thing is I'm not a very organized person. I have everything kind of lying around, and that did kind of hinder me along the way. I lost people's phone numbers a couple of times and had to rush around trying to figure out how I could contact them. But eventually it did all work out in the end, and I'm happy that that happened. All right, now here's all the people I need to thank for helping me out along the way. And these are all people here in this school that I'm sure you all know. So Miss Chapman, I need to thank her because it was her art class. They're the ones that did the recycled art project, and she was really nice about that. She helped me all along the way, even got some recycled materials of her own, and I wouldn't have been able to hold that project without her. Secondly, Miss Smith. She's the one that introduced me to a lot of the resources I ended up using. She's also the one that showed me the donors' choose and allowed me to get the recycling bins from them. She even suggested the recycling seminar. Miss Parridge was the one that helped me in the recycling seminar, and I say this as a fact that without her, that would have been a disaster, because I'm not too super sharp on how to teach people and I guess hold kind of a class and everything. But thankfully she was experienced and she helped me out a lot along the way. So I owe her thanks for that. Secondly, Miss Cottle and Miss Labrie, they just helped me out along the way with tons of miscellaneous things. Like when I was feeling stuck or overwhelmed or I didn't know what to do next, they would always be there to pick me back up and say, hey, you can do this, it's not so bad, you're almost there. Then there was Mr. Jesus and Mr. Nate. They helped me with different aspects of my project. Mr. Jesus, I have to thank him because he agreed to continue picking up these recycling bins for me even after I've left the school. And I need to thank him for that, because before I was the one picking up all the bins, and now that there's someone else that can do that, I feel like I really did have a lasting impact on the school. And Mr. Nate was the one, he helped me out recording the printing tracking and like figuring out how to graph essentially the printing results. So without all of these people, my project would have been much less successful, and I needed to thank them for that. So that essentially is my project of recycling and helping my school become more recycle friendly. So I want to thank all of you for helping me out and just even listening to me up here talking to you about all of this. So yes, thank you.